Welcome once again to the Black Health Matters Fall Summit 2020. We certainly appreciate your spending time with us today, covering a variety of different important issues and health subjects regarding the African American patient community. We're now going to delve deeper into the issue of mental health. And of course, with the way things are going right now in our country with the convergence of COVID and our concerns and mental issues with regard to work, health, staying at home, dealing with our children if we have them at home. All of these things are contributing to mental health issues, in addition to, of course, the racial profiling and issues surrounding police violence and violence in our communities. All are contributing to mental health concerns within the African American community here in the United States. We have two distinguished gentlemen with us, but we also want to thank our mental health session sponsors, the Kappa Alpha Psi Fraternity Incorporated, Omega Psi Phi Fraternity Incorporated, and the Links of Bergen County, New Jersey, and the National Pan-Hellenic Council. We have two distinguished presenters with us today. Dr. Stephen Broughton Md, BMS, a psychiatry specialist from Pine Bluff, Arkansas. Dr. Broughton has more experience with psychotic disorders and addiction and substance abuse than many other specialists in his area. He currently practices at Southeast Arkansas Behavioral Healthcare System Incorporated and is affiliated with Jefferson Regional Medical Center. Dr. Broughton earned his bachelor's degree from the University of Arkansas at Pine Bluff and completed his medical education at the University of Arkansas for Medical Sciences in Little Rock, Arkansas. In addition, we have Dr. Obari Cartman. He's a father, son, brother, uncle, thinker, writer, therapist, photographer, drummer, as I am, and a grassroots mental health advocate. That drumming definitely helps to release some of that mental pressure. He received his undergraduate degree from Hampton University and a PhD in clinical and community psychology from Georgia State University. Currently, Dr. Cartman is the program director for Real Men Charities Incorporated, where he facilitates weekly men's wellness and African drumming circles. I can definitely relate to that. Two distinguished gentlemen discussing mental health. Here we go. It's going to be hot.
You got it, Baba. I'm deferring to my elders. You get to start.
I thank you, my brother.
Absolutely.
I thank you, my brother. We obviously are happy to be here, and we want to thank Black Health Matters for an extraordinary opportunity to present it at this summit. Obviously, this is something our communities need. This education of medical issues and mental health issues. So we're very pleased to be here. I'm just gonna start by saying, obviously, that just to give a little background before we get into a real discussion, and Obari will fill you in on a lot of other things. But mental illnesses are conditions that affect the brain. They can cause changes in the way people feel, think, and act. They're pretty common, and each year, 1 in 4 adults in the United States is affected by mental illness. If you have untreated mental illnesses, It causes a lot of significant problems every day in families and with people coping every day in life, and they can even make them feel physically ill. It can happen to anybody, and it affects people of all ages and backgrounds. There's no exact cause of mental illness, but we know that family history, in terms of genetics, brain chemistry, and also stressful or traumatic events may be factors in determining whether a person may be affected by mental illness. Environmental stresses are often associated with mental illness. Some mental illnesses, particularly depression. And we're very obviously concerned at this point in time because not only are we in the middle of a pandemic crisis, which affects people in a number of ways, the pandemic crisis affects people's station in life. You know, risk factors that push our depression and their various things are unemployment, other natural disasters, which we seem to be having a lot more natural disasters in terms of hurricanes, major fires, and other things going on environmentally at this time. So we're getting into things that are going to really be pertinent, we think, that we feel we can provide a little bit of information for you with.
Yeah, for sure.
Go ahead, Obari.
How's my sound? We good? Okay, I just switched to my phone. This laptop was going in and out. So, you know, it's one of the things that I really appreciate about these kind of forums, that we learn a lot of new skills. And for me, I've just really appreciated the resilience and adjusting that we have to do to make these connections still work. Even a national conference like this, like it's a beautiful gathering to be able to meet and be in conversation with a brother from Arkansas who I had previously not met, but now we got an opportunity to, you know, cross paths and continue to do work together. It's like these networkings, you know, I mean, it's really the brilliance of, you know, humans, but particularly I've been really impressed with Black people and my elders who have just who worked this out. Like, you know, brother got the background with the Kappa going, like everything is, you know what I'm saying? There was a moment in time when like my grandparents was like, what is this text messaging stuff? But we have overcome these moments in the most difficult year we've seen in a long time, and they're going to come out of it with some new skills, new connections, new networks. And I think that's the brilliance of what it means to be Black and aware of not just the mental health challenges, but honoring the skills that are embedded in our culture, in our everyday life, and in our blood. I believe there's something in us that is uniquely positioned to be able to deal with adversity. But to your point about the environmental challenges, we also got to not just be okay with bouncing back, because when they throw us against the wall over and over again, we have to figure out ways to create new systems and structures so that our children are well. Because as resilient as we are, we also struggle and are accustomed to struggling too often. And, you know, we're smart enough to figure out a new way. And there's no way to do it without connecting. So I really just, I'm honored to be in the space and to be a part of the forum so we can connect.
Indeed. And obviously, since you mentioned, I got to give a shout out to HBCUs.
Absolutely.
My brother going to Hampton, and I went to University of Arkansas Pine Bluff, which is formerly AM&N College, which is another HBCU. So, got to give our shout outs to HBCUs.
Yeah, and so I mean, part of it, bigger than that even, is using this moment to think about the power of focusing on Black issues in our own institutions, right? So this Black Health Matters conference is unique in that, you know, we can have a health conference in general, and there's something about like the body and the, you know, the kidneys and the pancreas works in the same way across different bodies, but the mind is different. The mind is very impacted by culture and race and ethnicity. And so I think it's super important that in this mental health moment, today is World Mental Health Day. So a lot of people are talking, you know, just encouraging people to go to therapy and take care of themselves. That the self-care movement generically is really powerful, but specifically for us, there are unique conditions that we have to deal with. There are unique traumas intergenerationally that we suffered from and that our healing has to consider. When we talk about drumming in the beginning, when we talk about music, I use a lot of hip hop in my work with young men, right? We talk about food. We talk about just like the things that happen to our brain and our bodies and the damage done to us generationally. Some of that you can't talk through. Some of that you got to sweat out. some of that you got to move and breathe out, right? There's trauma in our bloods that like is sitting around, like the traditional talk therapy in the mental health world, or you know, and a part of what I want to get into with you is how psychiatry is dealing with some of these unique challenges. Because I actually some specific questions. This ain't an interview for you, but I got questions that I wanted to talk to you because I love being able to be in touch with Black male psychiatrists, because what I deal with in Chicago, I'm in the South Side, West Side, doing work with a lot of young men who are popping pills that they don't even know what they are, and it's just beyond the scope of my expertise to be able to break down some of the physiological neuroscience of the impact of, you know, the Adderall and the Prozac and some of these, you know, traditional anxiety drugs that they're taking just to cope with all the stuff that we're dealing with. So I lean on your expertise to help me with that. You know, hopefully we can have a follow-up conversation about that. But I'm curious to know in your work, particularly with some of the young people, I feel like it's a generational thing where we were just taking, you know, smoking weed, that the young people, at least in Chicago, are exposed to, you know, lean and all these other kind of psychotropic, medications that are not being used properly. I'm curious to know if you're experiencing the same thing.
Well, they're looking for an ability to cope with things that they don't necessarily understand.
Yeah.
And if they're not talking to anybody, then they have a lack of understanding of what's going on and how to deal with it.
Yeah.
So they lean on things that sometimes gives them an escape.
Yeah.
You know,
Yeah.
we have a significant problem down here in the South with hallucinogens such as K2, and also when they mix other various chemicals with weed on a regular, and that my concern, you know, mostly is the permanent effects, not the just the getting high part of it, but the permanent effects on the brain.
Yeah.
You know, I've dealt with a lot of young people who can't really give you a reason. They just know that they were exposed to it so early in their lives. You know, a lot of us didn't start smoking weed till we got at least out of high school, maybe to college.
Yeah.
But they're starting to smoke weed as early as 9 or 10 years old now.
That's right. And so,
it's
like, developmentally, in terms of where the brain is, what does that do? How does that interrupt the normal brain development? Are there certain areas?
The brain doesn't fully get totally functional until you're in your late teens. You know, it's still developing for quite a while, and then when you start giving a psychotropic not medication, but a psychotropic drug that can alter that, then you're taking a big risk on something that will be long lasting.
Yeah, it's a huge problem where I'm at. And I think the music is making it worse because what they're listening to is not just talking about like the perils of this lifestyle, but they're making it seem so fun and engaging. It's just like normal. And then we have artists that are committing, you know, I consider it suicide and through overdosing. And you know, we had a lot of panels last month for Suicide Awareness Month. And one of the things that we're looking at, particularly for Black men and for Black communities in general, are the rising rates of suicide that we're seeing, the younger that they're showing up, and what are the things that are influencing those, you know, those dynamics? Because, you know, this used to be white stuff. Like this when I was growing up, you know, we could hurt each other, but we wouldn't hurt ourselves. This kind of stuff that we used to say, it's not true no more. And so part of what I'm trying to figure out is how to look at all these things: depression, anxiety, suicide, ideation, and how they might not show up on the chart in the way we typically measure these things. That there might be a
I think it develops.
Yeah.
I think it develops because with the lack of maturity and the lack of understanding, you know, young children don't understand death. They don't get that it's permanent. And if the brain hadn't developed, it hadn't matured to a certain extent based on the fact that they start abusing drugs early, or they're just traumatized by their own living environment or anything like that.
Yeah.
Then they get into things, video games and everything, where death just doesn't affect them the way that it affects those of us who are mature enough to understand it.
And you think that they don't think that it's permanent because of the video games? Is that part of it? Because they see them
So the
die and
video
they'll come back
games,
to life.
yeah, based on
Movies.
video games, based on what they see around themselves in their
Yeah.
environments, you know, they see, they've been traumatized by what they see in the neighborhood, and to the point that it doesn't hardly affect them nearly as much as folks would assume that it does. They're not. When you see little kids walking out at nighttime and they're not afraid of gunfire,
Yeah.
so
Yeah.
that's a different understanding of what's going on.
Yeah, that's right. I had a young man about a couple of weeks ago. We were at a forum, and he was describing a moment of attempted suicide that we would have missed if we didn't get to hash it out in this way. He talked about getting to a place where he didn't want to live, you know, whatever pain and trauma he experienced, he didn't think there was a solution to. And so he woke up one day and said, I want to end it. The way he went about it wasn't, you know, a gun to the head or a noose. It was by going into his, what he called his ops neighborhood. He went a couple blocks over to where some rivals, as soon as on site would have seen him, started to shoot at him. And so that was his way of committing suicide that day. He did get shot. He got shot like 3 times in the shoulder, but he ended up surviving that and telling me the story after the fact. But, you know, all around the country, people know of Chicago as a gun violence, you know, they know of our problem with gun violence. But we're having a slow time helping the city, the officials see this as a mental health problem because we're not diagnosing it in the same way. Because that young man might not have appeared depressed. He might not have appeared anxious, right? He might not have appeared traumatized if you don't ask the right questions, but underneath his functioning, his behavior, his apathy, whatever the things are that he's showing, there are deep traumas that, you know, I think that we miss sometimes in Black men in particular. And I'm wondering how we as professionals need to make adjustments in how we do work to tell this story, to articulate these problems, mental health problems, and impact like the system of it, and not just, you know, deal with one patient at a time, do our best to heal them, help them cope to get back to work. But like, what are the things that we need to be doing now in light of the system change, the structural racism that's come to light in 2020? Like, what is our role in that? I know police reform, I get judge reform, I get defund the police. Like, what is it for mental health that needs to change structurally in order for us to do real work that heals the trauma for us?
Well, you know, you make a great point there. One of the things that I've been doing for the past 20 years is trying to educate, trying to remove the stigma involved with our communities in terms of mental health. You know, when I finished my training in psychiatry and I returned to Arkansas, I was in Georgia and I returned to Arkansas, my home, in 1994. I was only the second Black male psychiatrist in the state of Arkansas. 1994.
Yeah.
Let's skip ahead to now, present times. 26 years later, I'm still one of only 3 in the entire state.
Okay. Wow.
There are only 9 total Black psychiatrists in the state of Arkansas.
Wow.
So you see that.
So is we need to funnel, get into the high schools to get more Black people into?
Well, you know, there's still somewhat of a stigma associated with mental health. A lot of people still, what do you go to the mental health center for? You know, where do you go see a psychiatrist? Are you crazy?
Yeah,
and that's something that continues on, even with an understanding that, you know, this is something that may be healthy and worthwhile. We still are educating. And I'm gonna tell you, even more important than Black psychiatrists are Black social workers, Black psychologists, Black therapists. And these when I have a patient load over 7,000.
Wow.
And I've been in community mental health basically my entire career because I wanted to go to the people that need the most help.
Right.
But I see so many people that I have to deal with the medication issues more so than the time to be able to sit down and actually provide somebody with psychotherapy, which they really, really need. The psychotherapy probably is more important than the medications in some instances.
And
Because,
so, I mean, I
because people are
appreciate
dealing with
this.
stuff.
Yeah. So in your play, I mean, you've been doing this for decades, right? Do you feel like you're making a difference, or does it feel like we are just running in place? And what would it mean to really expand, not just have more Black faces in the institutions, but deal with the, part of the stigma, I think, is justified. I think there's some ways in which there should be some natural distrust of American health systems. This year, people saying even if a vaccine was released, that, like, I don't know if a lot of people in my circles would take it. I certainly wouldn't give it to their children, right? I think that there's even a more distrust of, like, the CDC when they keep changing positions. And as long as, the president we got right now is the representative of the state and the healthcare systems, and may still be again, right? I think that distrust is connected to the stigma, which I get. Like, I get why someone would say, I don't trust these hospitals. I don't trust this medication. I don't trust your degrees, your licenses. So one part of this is getting more Black people in place so we could change the systems. But once we're in place, like you in place and you've been there for a while, what is it that we can do, need to organize better, to get communities, to push institutions to do better, to really change the way the institutions look from inside out? Or is it
But I
possible?
found,
Or is it, or do
every
we need
once
to
in a
create new
while
systems?
I'm motivated by somebody that reaches my office and wants to see a Black male.
Mm-hmm. You got choppy, Doc.